I want to pick up on something you mentioned out there, and this might be the key not just for solving this oversupply concern that people have, but also perhaps the Chinese economy. The key is the domestic consumer in China. Now, shifting towards a domestic-driven economy has been one of the trickiest economic problems, I think, for the last 100 years, especially in the Chinese context. How successful do you think are these efforts going to be? Because the Chinese government has tried many times in the past to try and at least stimulate the Chinese consumer. Why is it so tricky, and why do you think it might succeed this time around, if it will?
Well, the demand-focused policies are really just recent. If you think about the last 10 years, it's always about supply, subsidizing supply and production. And we've seen a modicum of modest results from the last year's September's stimulus policies, which we have seen consumption pick up a little bit. But I think this is really a longer-term structural issues. If you think about the hundreds of millions of people in the countryside without proper social infrastructure and protection, those are the ones that have the biggest marginal propensity to consume. And I'm also very positive about the young generation because, as we know about the Chinese youth, they like to have a good time, they spend and they borrow. So there's a transitional issue as well. But I think really from the last question, it's really about moving away from manufacturing to services, right? Or transitioning to services. Services only account for 50% of GDP in China. It really should be at 80%, including employment. And this young generation, they're all about the coffee, the retail, the traveling, the entertainment, education, finance. That should be opened up. That would ease the pressure on everyone
Could you help us clarify something? Because on one hand, that picture is correct about the Chinese, the young generation in China being perhaps more vibrant and active. But then we're also getting stories of Chinese youth lying down, right? And we also have stories of perhaps revenge saving, which is an interesting way of actually reacting to perhaps economic uncertainty from the youth. What exactly is the picture for the Chinese youth? Because we're seeing both stories in equal fashion at the moment, based on what you're seeing on in the mainland at the moment.
We do have to separate the cyclical component, which is we're in an economic downturn. Their jobs are not secure. From the general propensity to consume, their desire to spend is much greater than the parents' generation. If China is able to come out of the economic downturn, stabilize employment opportunities, this youth would be able to spend. But we've also seen how much they embrace leisure. Yes, lower costs, lower spending, but they're still having a great time.